discussing the Americas right up until just around 1500. And we're going to start off by looking at Mexico. Mexico in Central America, Mesoamerica, whatever you would want to call it. But, the regions highlighted here that share a common civilization and culture, one that had begun, as we've seen, with the Olmecs more than 4,000 years ago on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, who developed the first urban civilization in the Americas and set many of the ground rules for Mesoamerican civilization right down to the 16th century. There are, of course, other cultures that had developed at similar times, groups like the Zapotecs, the Toltecs, the Chichimecs. We could keep going. Of course, the best known are the Maya, living in the Yucatan Peninsula and Guatemala, as well as the highlands of southern Mexico. They reached their peak in the early Middle Ages and then begin to decline after about 900 AD. We took a look at the city of Teotihuacan in central Mexico, which also declined in the same period. Now, the period after the Mayan collapse and that of Teotihuacan is the period of the Toltecs. The Toltecs are a group that had lived north of Teotihuacan and had come in from somewhere in the north around the year 900. They seem to have destroyed Teotihuacan. They destroyed many of the Mayan cities. Out of this sort of general chaos and time of collapse, a new order slowly emerges. And when we do, we can say some things with fair degree of certainty. The Valley of Mexico and the areas around it are going to be speaking the language of Nahuatl. The Valley of Mexico is an area surrounded by volcanoes that is a quite high plateau. It has very, very high fertility in its soil due to the volcanic action. It has a relatively mild climate because of its altitude. It is wet. There are lots of lakes and wetlands in the Valley of Mexico, as well as many other resources. As early as the time of Teotihuacan, there are beginnings of sort of urban civilization in this area. And the Valley of Mexico itself is divided up into numerous small city-states. Now, into the Valley of Mexico will come a people who call themselves the Mexica. The Mexica are nomads related to the Toltecs who have come from somewhere north of the Valley of Mexico, according to their own legends. In their legends, they came from a place of swans somewhere far to the north called Aztlan. There are going to be attempts later on to find Aztlan, but it has never been identified with certainty. It is usually thought to have been somewhere in north central Mexico, though some activists today located in the western part of the United States. Now, the name in Nahuatl of people from Aztlan is Azteca. From Azteca, we get Aztec. This is a name that will be applied to the Mexica people after 1800. They themselves will always call themselves the Mexica. Because there will be a later country using the same name and adjectives derived from it. Uh, it has become the standard practice to refer to this earlier group as the Aztecs rather than the Mexica. But that is not what they themselves did, and that is worth remembering. Now, the Mexica, when they first arrive in the Valley of Mexico, they are remembering that they're nomads. They serve as mercenaries in the wars of other people. They are a tribe without a homeland. Their ruler, the Tlatoani, will always recognize other chieftains, rulers of cities, as being above him. This won't last forever, but in the early days, after they arrive in the Valley of Mexico in 1248, they are few, they are weak. They wander, they move place to place. And then on June 20th, 1325, a group of Mexica see something that had been predicted to them by their prophets. They see an eagle carrying a serpent in its claws that lands and stands on a cactus. And seeing this combination of things, they say, this is the place that we had come from the north to settle in and to build our city. This emblem will become the symbol of their city, later on their empire, and again, it might be something people recognize. Now, the cactus is on an island, and they take over the island, and they call the city that they found Tenochtitlan. It will also come to be called the City of the Mexica, or Mexico City. It is originally on an island in a shallow lake. That lake has not existed for more than a century. The city they found begins to grow, and it will, by 1500, be over 200,000 people. Will be one of the largest cities in the world. Now, at this point, if you were to look at the Valley of Mexico, you would see the lakes, all of which are connected. Lake Texcoco, in specific, being where Tenochtitlan is based. All of these cities around the lake are dominated by one city, Azcapotzalco, located close to Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan pays tribute to Azcapotzalco, and it is smaller, weaker, located on an island, but this is not going to be a permanent situation. In 1426, the ruler of the Mexica, Itzcoatl, will make an alliance between Tenochtitlan and two of its neighboring cities, Texcoco and Tlacopan. They form what is called the Triple Alliance, and within just a few years, not only have they achieved their own independence, but they have begun to assert dominance over the entire Valley of Mexico. They begin to grow out of the Valley of Mexico, building an empire that conquers all of the speakers of Nahuatl, as well as neighboring groups as far south as Oaxaca, where the Zapotecs are brought under their rule. They will soon control not only all of Central America, but all of Central Mexico, but even areas as far south as Guatemala. Their advance into Guatemala is largely done to gain control of the supply of chocolate. Now, the only people who really hold them back are the Tarascans in Zacatecas, also known as the Zacatecs, who are the only peoples in the Americas who use metal, copper and bronze, for their tools and weapons. Otherwise, they are unbeatable. However, look at the map of the empire, and you notice there are two holes in the orange, one very, very close to Tenochtitlan itself. And that hole is due to the necessity of fighting flower wars. It is the Republic of Tlaxcala. Tlaxcala is not conquered. Tlaxcala is dominated and in fear of the Mexica and their allies, but they remain independent. And the reason for this is pretty straightforward. War is necessary for the religions of the Nahuatl people of the Valley of Mexico. It is necessary because of their beliefs. War is fought not primarily to conquer, not primarily to kill, but to take prisoners. And taking prisoners is vital religiously. So, leaving Tlaxcala independent means that the people of Tenochtitlan can attack, and they have what they call flower wars, wars without killing, wars where two armies meet on a field, and the more powerful is able to take more prisoners. The winner is the side that leaves with the most captives. Seems very, very civilized, much more gentle than the type of warfare we know, except for the fact that captive taking is not a sign of pacifism. It is kind of the opposite. The Mexica believe that the sun will fail to rise if it does not receive the blood of human hearts every day. Mass human sacrifices are undertaken to inaugurate new temples. For instance, in 1487, the Mexica built the final version of the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple of Tenochtitlan, to inaugurate this new massive pyramid. They invite rulers from all the cities subject to come to the ceremonies, and according to reports, they sacrifice 80,400 prisoners over about a 4-day period. Where do they get the prisoners? From flower wars. Why do they need to get prisoners? They need to have prisoners so that they have people to sacrifice to their gods. And who are their gods? Well, here is a chart showing some of them. The most significant is one called Tlaloc. Tlaloc is a rain and storm god. Another is Huitzilopochtli, who is the god of the sun. He is the god who demands blood daily. He will sometimes be called Huitzilobos, in a half Spanish, half Nahuatl name. Another significant one is Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is a god of wind and sky and stars. He is supposed to have brought many of the arts of civilization down from the gods to humanity in the past. And according to legend, among the Mexica and their neighbors, he had very, very pale, almost alabaster like skin, and had an unusual growth of hair on his face, which is very interesting. That, according to their own legends, a bearded white man was the person who brought much of the arts of civilization, as well as rules about living well and justly. Uh, there have been many, many interpretations of what this story might possibly have come from, but it will be incredibly important during the course of the 16th century. There are many other gods. There are mother goddesses. There are vampire gods. Generally, the gods of the Mexica are unusually bloodthirsty. I guess that would be the best overall statement. Now, the Mexica also have a theory of the history of the world. This is common among people in Mesoamerica at the time. Believe that there have been 4 suns. Each sun has a different god who is the dominant one. There are a different group of people. After each sun is destroyed, the world dies and everyone dies, except perhaps for a few people or gods or animals who shelter in caves while the world burns. Then a new sun will arise and come into the new world. The idea is there are 2 gods, Quetzalcoatl and Quetzalcoatl, we just met, who represent light and dark, good and evil, fighting against each other, trying to destroy each other's creatures. Our current sun began some point in the past when a god sacrificed himself, and when he was sacrificed, he was transformed into the sun. The 4th sun will continue until he stops being fed. This is Huitzilopochtli. Until he stops being fed by daily blood sacrifices. When that happens, the sun will turn black, the stars will fall from the sky, and the earth will be destroyed. All of these prophecies will look like they just might come true, or are suspected they might be about to come true during the reign of the 9th Tlatoani of the Mexica. His name is Moctezuma. He's the 2nd ruler of that name. Comes in power in 1502. He is the ruler of the Mexica at the absolute height of their empire, bringing new territories on all sides into the empire. There are many signs, though, that begin to appear. There is a comet seen in the sky. The prophets and soothsayers of the Mexica suggest this means that something terrible is about to happen. Temple catches on fire. Many, many people throughout the Valley of Mexico hear the cries of a ghost woman. Something they believe is about to happen. What? We shall see.